The people who built the schools were consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students who were part of the system because they wanted them to be obedient.
So breaking them. I think there's a lot of people that are looking at the current public school system and the current curriculum, and they're saying, that's not what we believe in my household.
The benefit of homeschooling is the opportunities and the freedom and the flexibility that you do have.
So here's a list of famous people that are homeschoolers that a lot of people don't know.
I remember seeing homeschool kids as a kid, and they were always kind of weird.
Dude, public school kids are weird too, especially today.
People will look down on a kid who's learning from home online, but will then go to college online.
And work from home online. Our kids are going to be taught what we care about. I can say with confidence is better than half the shit that the federal government cares about. Friends, welcome back. Today we are talking about homeschooling.
Why would you talk about those weirdos?
Well, we have a resident expert with us for one thing.
That's me.
An article came out recently. In the article, it's talking about Scientific American. They recently called for federal homeschool regulations, saying that, and I quote, there's potential for an untold number of U.S. children at risk of poor education or even abuse.
My first reaction to that when you sent that was to me is like, have you checked on your own schools? Like as far as
public school system?
The public school system.
Right. I mean, if we're talking about the risk of poor education and abuse, yeah, we've got to prove that the public school system these days can offer a better alternative. But here's the thing. Look, we'll get into that. We'll get into some of the evidence behind, homeschool versus public school. I'm a public school kid. Jake was homeschooled. Yeah. One of seven that was homeschooled. Yep. I'm married to Jake's wife, so she was homeschooled as well. I
went to private school for a little bit, but
is that just like, was that your room? Like when you're in your room, it was like private school?
Go to your room.
It was
private school?
It was very private, very exclusive. It was just you.
No, for about 4 years I did go to a private school.
But look, if we look at the data, we're not the only ones interested in having this conversation. So Jake and I, we're dads. We've got young kids. My kids too. Your kids 5 and 3.
5 and 3.
And we're at the point where like education is something we're thinking about with our young children. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because if you look at the stats in 2019, there were 2.5 million students homeschooled in the U.S. Here in 2024, we're close to twice that. We're at 4 million now.
Really?
So it's been a very rapid increase all of a sudden. If you think back to the 2019 world compared to 2024, there has been on many fronts growing distrust of institutions in our country and even around the world. But I think that would probably explain a lot of the motivation behind parents beginning to say, well, is public school the right path? Like, can I trust these institutions?
I wonder why they stopped
the right move?
Trusting them.
Well, so let's get into this. I think before we like get into the heavy stuff, the data, some of the evidence for and against, whatever. I think you put together a list of pretty well-known like celebrities that were homeschooled that maybe don't fit the stereotype, right?
Dude, there's so many more like that I couldn't even put on this list. That
is it? Well, hold on a second. Is this just you trying to build a case for like homeschoolers are cooler than people think? And
no,
is it
no, because trust me, I'm a loser and a dork. But what I'm saying is like,
and I say
there's that quintessential like that nerd spelling bee, awkward, can't speak in public type of person, and or homeschooler, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people who are homeschooled that I grew up with some of these people that people will recognize on here.
Well, and I should say, just given the theme of this episode, I make fun, but it is all in jest because like you're one of my very best friends, you're my business partner. Also, I'm married to a homeschooler, and so like we joke.
Yeah,
but
there are pros and there's cons to homeschooling, and
I'm for it. I think I should just get that out of the way first. Like even though I joke, like I'm an advocate.
Dude, I'm going to homeschool my kids.
And we plan to homeschool ours as well. So,
especially that crucial, vital time between, 0 and like 7, where you can like help sculpt that character, that you could really mold their morality. And kids are going to get indoctrinated either way, with what I believe or what the school believes. And I want to instill values in them that can better their life and help better humanity.
Yeah.
I want to do that. I don't want some school doing it. Now, not everybody can afford to do that or has the time to do that. But anyways,
Well, I want to make a point really quick that you've helped me just realize too. Like at my kid's 2 years old. We're homeschooling her now, which I didn't really think about.
100% you are.
But like, she's learning so much, just being a member of our family. Right. And at 2 years old, like, she's super advanced. She's a huge priority for us in our life, and yours. Your kids are my niece and nephew.
I just watched her the other day. I was like,
niece.
Oh, she's way smarter than most 2-year-olds.
Well,
in like her reasoning and
we are technically homeschooling her. So that's you don't really think about that until they're a certain age. But like even like you said, from 0 on, so from the moment they're born, like, you're teaching things. So.
Well, I before we get into this, I knew it for a fact that as soon as my kids came home, I was homeschooling them. Like, not waiting till they're 4 or 3 or 2. I knew then and there, like, I better start learning.
Yeah.
And I sat down and in great detail wrote out how I wanted to present. Like, I wanted them to be curious to learn. To me, that was the most important thing early, was how do I instill curiosity? I wanted to teach them how to learn. In the morning, I'll tell them a story. Just a short little one about history and why they did this. I always talk about a dilemma, in every story I tell. And how they solve that. Well, come lunchtime, when we sit down for lunch, I will ask them, what questions do you have about this world and how can I answer them? And
you realize as they get older, that's going to become a lot more difficult for you to answer those questions.
They ask questions all the time.
That's very open-ended.
All the time. They have questions all the time. Then I'm like, I actually don't know. Let me Google that real quick. And then, or I'll just say sometimes I don't know and I'm still learning. I very much instilled in them that I am still learning. Every day, I am still learning. Hey, Daddy's reading this book so that I can teach you. So like, I like to read a lot. And so I don't want them to think I'm ignoring them. I always tell them I'm learning so I can teach you. But at lunch, they'll ask the craziest questions and I'll do my best to instill in them. And at night, I'll always tell them a story that has like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it helps being a writer that I can tell these fun stories.
You are a storyteller.
They'll shut off the TV and put their iPads down anytime I say it's time for a story.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's important. Like, you're right. You're teaching them now.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, here's a list of famous people that are homeschoolers that a lot of people don't know. Thomas Edison. Now, not every single one of these people were homeschooled their entire life, but a good portion of their life.
Okay.
So, one of the greatest inventors.
Yeah, important figure. Is he a celebrity? I may have misspoke. I don't know if Thomas Edison qualifies as a celebrity.
I don't know if I have it on this list, but
historical figure.
Nikola Tesla was also homeschooled for a good chunk of his life.
Okay.
Tim Tebow.
Yep.
I actually went to church with him.
Condoleezza Rice.
She was the Secretary of State for, was it Bush? Right?
I don't know, but she's awesome.
The Irwin kids. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Steve Irwin.
That makes a ton of sense.
I was so sad when Steve Irwin died. Legitimately.
Yeah, everybody was.
Julian Assange.
A rebel.
Yeah, Serena and Venus Williams.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. Super.
Billie Eilish and her brother. Homeschooled.
Yeah, I think I knew that. C.S. Lewis. Huh.
C.S. Lewis.
Wow.
The Jonas Brothers.
I think I knew that.
Yeah. Mark Twain. Now, he didn't actually, he was not homeschooled. He and his wife homeschooled their kids. Can you imagine? Mark Twain himself be the one teaching you how to read and write.
Well, what's crazy is like so many kids are taught literature and English
with his stuff,
with Mark Twain's stuff as a reference. Yeah. Same with Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
Yep.
J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings guy himself.
So I'm pausing here. You may have more. I'm seeing a theme of people that basically see the world differently. They see like whether we're talking elite athletes, whether we're talking musicians, or whether you're talking someone like an author or even a Thomas Edison, where they like see a problem to be solved, but like they're processing the world around them maybe a little bit differently.
100%. There's a reason why I have a hard time functioning in society, because I don't see the world exactly. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know who Brett Cooper is, but she works for the Daily Wire. She's got a really popular YouTube channel.
How dare you?
How dare I what?
A lot of people know who Brett Cooper is.
I know, she's cool.
She's a big deal.
But like, so she was an actress. at a young
Yes.
age, and it allowed her to have that freedom, that time to do things. See, what people don't understand, like you went to school, and you sit down, you have a curriculum you have to do. If you get done in time, you still have to sit there and you wait. If you don't have enough time, you have homework. There's all this thing. When you're doing, like, you're homeschooled, a lot of times it's a set curriculum that you have to get done in a certain amount of time. Like, you need to get this done this week. So you can get it all done like in 2 days and then go get a job. Mm-hmm. You then can work on other hobbies. I love to draw. I love to play music. So if I got my work done early, I could go do those things.
Yeah.
It didn't matter when I would do it. I was more creative in the mornings, and I was really good, I would say early afternoon. And at nights I did better with school. So I'd do my school at night. I had jobs young, making money when my friends had no chance to because they were stuck in school, and I was out working, and I would just do homeschool at night.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of the structure of public school has built into it a lot of transit time and break time that not every student necessarily needs and is not necessarily the most efficient. Like, if you think about, for me, there were a couple of instances growing up where I had to walk like at least a mile to get to the bus stop in the morning. And then, because it wouldn't get any closer, there was one instance when I was in middle school, my bus ride was 45 minutes because I was the first stop picked up. And then at the end of the day, I was the last stop dropped off. So right there, like, I had like a morning and evening commute. Like, it took me,
sort of like it was prepping you for a job.
Yeah, right. It took me 20 minutes anyway to like walk to the bus stop, then another 45 to like ride the bus to get to school. And so doing that twice a day, because like to the bus stop and from the bus stop, like that adds a lot of time. And then on top of it, you've got time between classes that like built in where you're shuffling to go see a different professor. Then you've got time going to the cafeteria. There's recess time. There's all these things where, like, if you actually have focused attention from a teacher with a customized curriculum for you, many homeschool parents will say that they're done with the day's curriculum within a few hours. And then they can go out and there's many instances too, I know, of like families that are going on a family vacation, and they're going somewhere tropical, or they're going somewhere to the city, they're going somewhere interesting. And part of that vacation becomes like an education. Mm-hmm. It's an education for an education vacation nerd for the kids or for the family. It's like, we're going to go experience this new thing and learn about this culture or this type of ecosystem or whatever. So like, there's all this flexibility built in, which I think is super cool. I didn't have that.
I got a great story on that. My grandfather, wonderful man, and my father, brilliant people. One of the ways they would give me something to learn throughout just a normal day would be like this. They'd go, all right, Jake, we're at a job site. I need you to order the paint. And here's how you can calculate the square footage you need. Here's how many square foots are in a gallon. Here's how much extra I want you to get roughly. I'm going to order exactly what you do. So if it's under...
No pressure.
If it's under, I'll order that. If it's over, I'll order that. In either way, it's wrong and it costs the company money and us. But here's how to do it, and I'll help you. And I would calculate out, and he'd be like, okay, and he would order it. Sometimes I would be off. Sometimes I was dead on. The joy I would have when I get dead on. He would reciprocate that joy. You did it. What a great job. I learned so much. When you're talking about a building, you have to measure the entire building out. Mm-hmm. You have to think about all the peaks and the valleys and every corner. You know, you've got two, but it's applicable. Mm-hmm. And there was a responsibility behind that. Well, my grandfather did the same thing. That was my dad on a job site. Well, my grandpa would be like, I have 20 cows. Winter's coming up. They're not going to have grass to eat. I'm going to order exactly how much feed you calculate out. Here's how much a cow eats. Here's how much extra we need to have. Calculate out this much for this many months. I will order exactly what you do. If you get too much, cows will get too much, they'll die. If you order too little, cows have nothing to eat, they'll die.
Your family just liked causing you heartburn.
Yeah. But they knew I loved the challenge.
Yeah.
And so I'd calculate, I'd be that person like, and then they would help me with.
Your sister has some of that in her too.
What? Just
that like I'll figure this out. I'll do this.
It.
Like, yeah.
Well, literally they would help me. They'd show me how to math it out.
Math it out.
They would show me the proper way to do it. And they would encourage me. And then by the end of the summer, I had it all down pat, and they would order it. And it instilled at a young age that I can do something hard. And homeschooling is not perfect, but neither is necessarily public school. But what I think it did is it allowed me the opportunity to learn young how to be good at something. And a lot of times in school, we're so worried about peer pressure, and we're so terrified of what other kids will think of us. We don't have that yet time to really define who our character is. And that's why, to me, it's so important for my children at a young age that I will get them confident before bullying comes in, before worrying about what the opposite gender thinks, worrying about and my kids are around kids all the time because we go to church or they've got plenty of friends. So it's not like they're being isolated from the world, but let me
do you have more people?
Yeah. I mean, so Brett Cooper actually talked about her being homeschooled on the Iced Coffee Hour.
Let's hear it.
I like this podcast. It's about, I think, 2 minutes.
I remember seeing homeschool kids as a kid, and they were always kind of weird.
Yeah.
Which there are some.
That would be my biggest concern of ever doing homeschooling, is feeling like they're in a bubble, that they don't get the true experience. They're not going to be out there kind of forging their own path. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it comes down to the parents and how you dictate it. Because obviously, if you keep your kid just inside and you don't facilitate any other kind of extracurriculars, they're not going to benefit from it.
True.
But the benefit of homeschooling is the opportunities and the freedom and the flexibility that you do have. So if you are in, like my online school that I went to, I didn't have to finish all my classes by a certain period. I had 9 months. And so
Which I do want to say this. So she said online. Okay. Now, when I was younger, we didn't have online. We had computer programs. People will look down on a kid who's learning from home online, but will then go to college online.
And work from home
online.
Yeah.
Anyways, yes.
I wanted to get everything done in 2 weeks. I could have. If I said, hey, I'm shooting this movie, I'm not going to be able to do this for 3 months, I could pick it up later.
It's annoying. It's annoying me because the host's mics are picking up her voice. I can hear it. I can hear the room noise.
You audiophile.
I didn't go to we tried a co-op for a bit where you would go, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 hours in the morning, and you would get graded. Didn't really love that. The opportunities weren't great in Chattanooga. But I had so much flexibility, so I was able to do everything that I was interested in. I took art classes. I did gymnastics. I volunteered. And that was only because I had the time to do it. I was not, in school until 3 p.m. I spent so much time with my family. I spent so much quality time with my brothers. My relationship with my mom is one of the things that I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
And we really developed that over, that period.
That's the thing too, is I'm really close with my mom and dad. They're not perfect
And you're really
people.
close with your kids as well. So you're it makes sense that you would prioritize that.
And I feel like it's a little more natural. I mean, for almost all of civilization, parents were just had their kids with them. And it's a very recent thing that we just shoo them off.
Yeah.
But I also, the smartest people I know in my life are homeschoolers because they, advanced so quickly in their academic careers because they started working at a very young age. They're incredibly self-reliant. And I think those are some of the benefits. But again, it does go back to the parents. And so if you want to homeschool, but you are not in a position to take all of that on, it's then maybe they would be better off in some other school. And if you are concerned about academics, try maybe a public school or a private school.
Sure.
But I would also push back on people saying that homeschoolers are inherently weird. Because I definitely was weird. I was a total nerd. I was a theater kid. I had a career. And I look at kids that are normal these days, and I'm so glad that I'm not one.
So a lot of that too is I can relate to that.
Dude, public school kids are weird too.
Yeah.
Especially today.
Yeah.
It's a weird world where honestly roles have reversed. You look at a good chunk of public school kids, they're weird.
Yeah.
Where
so anxiety ridden.
From my perspective, from what I see, and I look at homeschool kids, I'm like, oh, that's
No,
that
that's
seems
also
more normal.
It's also like healthy homeschools, because like I know families where they didn't have a healthy relationship, where the parents were just dictators. The kids lived in fear of like maybe, like I particularly know someone who was like kind of had a militant father, was very like military style. The kids always stood in line. They'd wear suits everywhere they went, and they were just awkward, uncomfortable kids. They were brilliant, but like they can't function necessarily in society. And then there's the parents that say they're homeschooling their kids, and then they don't do anything. Mm-hmm. They don't teach them. They just didn't want them to go to public schools, and they couldn't afford private schools.
Well, and is there more to this?
No, that's it. That's okay, as far as this one goes.
So I think that's I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt when we talk about Scientific American. I think that's that was the tone and tenor of this article when they say, there's potential for, quote, an untold number of U.S. children at risk of poor education or even abuse. I think
I've known some of those kids.
Yeah. However, let's look at some of the data. Let's look at some of the evidence here, because I went through some of this stuff. If we're looking at homeschool kids versus public school, homeschool kids score 15 to 30% higher on standardized tests. They score higher on the SAT and the ACT. They are increasingly recruited by colleges and universities. And students, homeschool students, for many of the reasons we've already mentioned on the show, they prefer it. It's flexible. You can learn on vacation. Like I said, there's this, it can be more kind of customized and fun, like these immersive experiences, extracurriculars, like Brett Cooper said, can be more relaxed. There can be clarity and extra care around, an individual student. Like if you're working with the teacher all the time, or you're getting your instruction through a virtual environment, you can go at your own pace. And there's so many advantages to that. And then across the board, like today's modern homeschool kid is typically above average for social, emotional, and psychological development. They have lots of advantages. Now, as a public school kid, if I look back and I say, okay, well, how does a public schooler compare? Well, I would say, you mentioned this, they're influenced a lot by the politics, the social element of being at school, the cliques, the drama, the social bullshit, the bullying. I think they're influenced. I look at my education journey, and I spent a whole hell of a lot more time interfacing with a bunch of other morons my age and learning things from them, like the movies they were watching or the weird, stuff they were doing, than I did actually interfacing directly with a teacher or some sort of authority figure and the people I'm supposed to be learning with. What I learned most from was the people around me who were, also at my level of education, which in grade school is very low. Again, limited direct instruction time, working directly with the teacher, they're teaching like a classroom of 20 people. And then it's kind of this environment of like, you keep up or you can fall behind in major ways. And I had ADD growing up, still do, which is probably why our podcast takes a really long time.
You and me both, brother.
But I fell behind in a lot of ways. Now I caught up later on, I've ended up, doing, I'd like to think quite well, but,
Rich, don't you think that's a terrible way to judge kids?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like, okay, hey, you're bad at,
because you get grouped in.
You're bad at math. You're a failure. You're failing math. But they're not saying, hey, you're doing really good in English, in history, and science. You're actually really good at science, but you're failing at math. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just not something I just want to be, I don't know, ingraining in my child's brain that they're a failure, while not also looking at the fact, hey, you're really good at science. Like,
also like, let's take some time and figure out maybe why you're bad at math.
People used to tell me I was stupid when I went to private school. And it turns out I was just really dyslexic. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. And they would just say that my teacher called me stupid. And I believed her because, well, she's an adult. It turns out I was probably way smarter than she was. And I was asking questions she couldn't answer. It's like, well, you just told me all these rules for reading and none of that makes sense because look, it's not spelled that way. Well, that's just what it is. But the rule contradicts the rule you just gave me. Mm-hmm. And I used to get in trouble for arguing with them all the time. Well, that doesn't make sense. Earlier you said this, that, they hated me. I didn't do well.
No, I mean, look, again, the public school system is not designed for
any outliers.
Outliers, you're right. Yeah, I was gonna say it's like custom attention like that, but you're right. It can't really cater to that very effectively, and it doesn't. I think we're both examples of that. But it doesn't mean if you're totally right. It creates an environment where if you're an outlier, you're a problem. I would argue, based on our own personal experiences and based on the evidence, like sometimes the outliers just are thinking about things differently. They're seeing the world differently. They're understanding the situation differently. And that's not inherently bad. It's bad in that environment, but grand scheme of things, that could actually be a huge advantage in their life. So, I think homeschool provides a better environment to cultivate that. Just to get heavy for a second though, again, back to this quote, an untold number of U.S. children are at risk of poor education or even abuse. Aside from the education piece, let's talk abuse for a second in the public school system. The U.S. Department of Education, so going straight to the source, they've estimated that 1 in 10 children, 1 in 10, will experience sexual misconduct by a school employee by high school graduation. And then the U.S. Government Accountability Office says that a teacher that commits sexual misconduct will be transferred to 3 different schools before being reported to the police. Based on trends. This is, they're not just them predicting this. This is based on the data. Let's talk bullying for a second. Bullying ranks among parents' top concerns for their kids.
Oh yeah.
It's one of the top. You can see right here, it's the second to the top one. 35% of parents are fall into that category of extremely or very worried about bullying. And they should be. 50% of U.S. teens report being bullied in school, particularly girls. 54% of girls that are aged 15 to 17 years old have experienced bullying online, rumors or stories being told about them, bullying on their appearance. And fewer than half of all of those bullied, like I said, 50% of U.S. teens, fewer than half reported it to an adult or notified an adult about it. And by the way,
shame that comes along with that.
Yeah. And even on top of that, just to even kind of think through this data, if we say 50% of U.S. teens report being bullied, how many actually just, when they were polled, actually just said no, no, I haven't been bullied, or they didn't consider what they've experienced to be bullying. And I kind of wonder if that's what we're seeing in the data. I found this interesting, but schools that were classified as rural, which are kind of I would say the most small town, because it went from urban to cities to towns to rural, the data. There was more reported bullying going on in rural environments than in urban environments. My experience, having gone to school in a variety of different places, that's not what I experienced.
No, I wouldn't have expected that.
My small town school experience was really great. It wasn't when I was going to school in larger areas and more urban environments.
Man, that's almost the opposite of what I've heard. I know people that, were in the inner city and bullied ruthless.
Yeah.
And then their family fled and went to a small town.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But looking at this chart, here's the thing. If we're comparing public school to homeschool and the things that the parents are concerned about, you get on this list, and it's really tiny here. I'm trying to see it, but struggling with anxiety, depression, being bullied, being kidnapped or abducted, getting beaten up or attacked, having problems with drugs or alcohol, getting shot, getting pregnant, or getting someone pregnant, and getting in trouble with the police. I can assure you that in my child's homeschool environment, these are not things that are going to happen or things that I'm going to worry about.
No.
These are among parents' top concerns.
Wow.
None of these are a concern for a parent who's homeschooling their kid. Again, maybe anxiety or depression, but I would be willing to bet that anxiety and depression rates for homeschool kids are far below the national average for public. I feel that's a safe bet.
I think it would be difficult if you were an only child and homeschooled. That would
okay, fine, that'd be hard, but I'm not sure that you would be.
But trust me, as far as bullying, my sisters bullied the shit out of me.
All right, fine.
What they would pull the whole thing is like, you can't hit me back.
But that's bullying that like the parent is in direct influence of.
Well, so that happens whether or not you're at school or
like
at home.
I took my kid to the park today again. My daughter's 2, and there was some other kid who was wanting to go down the slide. And she's loving it. She's learning how to do all this stuff on the playground. So like she loves the experience. She's like going up the steps to get to the slide. And this kid who's probably, I don't know, 4 or something, he kept coming up the slide the wrong way. He was climbing the slide, not the stairs. And he'd like pop up in the top. And she was kind of like, I don't know what to do here. Like, am I supposed to keep going? Like she'd kind of look at me. And I was like, kid, are you coming down the steps? Like, that's okay. Like, we'll move. Like, if you're coming down here, like, fine. Or are you going to go down the slide? Like, when he's like, nope, neither. Like, okay, well, you got to go somewhere. And he's like, no, I'm just going to stay here. Like, well, you're not going to stay here. You need to either go down or you need to come up. He was like, nope, I'm going to stay here. And it got to the point where I'm looking over at there was like a whole corporate party going on and there was a bunch of kids and I'm like, is somebody going to parent this child or am I going to have to do it? Like, this is not like, I'm not going to sit here. Now, this kid's like borderline bullying me now. But like, so that's why I say like, it starts early. Kids are just bullies. They're just like kind of pre-programmed to be that way. So this just happens in public schools. But when it's your own kids and when it's your own house, you're in control of all of it. And you can be like, nope, go to your room. Or,
I'm pulling something up exactly. Do you remember it? It's where the dad overreacts and just starts smacking him.
Yeah. Dude, I can relate to that.
Let's see.
I can relate to that.
What would it be?
You're talking
this guy.
The puffed up chest?
Yeah. So when you're telling me this story, this is exactly what I pictured.
Anybody who like actually cares about their child and loves their child, I think can relate to this.
Oh, yes.
So hard. Because seriously, I would never do this ever. But I play out scenarios where I'm like these little like 4-year-old bullies. I'm like, I will smack you, and I will smack your parents, and I will smack the police, and I will like. Anyway, go ahead.
Here, watch this real quick.
You know what? They'd already started repairs, so we couldn't even take it anywhere else.
Nah, shit the way they do that.
Tell me about it.
I've never seen the beginning. I didn't know this was. Where's this?
$2.5 grand later, and then.
Australia. It sounds like.
Hey! What's going on?
It's mine, Daddy. Noah keeps taking away from me.
Noah, give it back.
No.
Noah, give it back.
No.
I said give it back now. Noah! What the hell are you doing?
Yep.
Oh, are you alright?
Yep.
Barry!
It's like instinct to like fight for your. It's so true. It's so true. That's how parents feel.
Righto. What's going on here?
It keeps going. I love it. Oh, there's so many extras.
This is so.
It's
so
the
good.
cat.
The Slap, Part 2, coming soon to Fox. Ow, what the?
That so perfectly captures like the emotion, like how you feel.
Yes, I remember once was in church. This little kid was bullying a bunch of kids and knocked over Kai. It pushed over your daughter, punched Kai in the face, gave him a bloody lip, and I'm like, who? Unfortunately, I said this in church. Who the hell's kid is this?
Yeah.
And nobody responded, so I picked the kid up.
Yeah.
And I walk him into the auditorium. I was like, whose kid is this? And the mother was like, oh, that's my kid. And I'm like,
you're like, he's beating the shit out of kids here.
You need to watch this kid.
Yes.
He's pushing people over. She's like, I'm so sorry. I was just so furious with it. It's like, you need to mother better. I was like in her face. I was like, this is ridiculous. Knocked a kid over, pushed a kid, tried to hurt my kid.
No, I remember. Like, legitimately, that kid's behavior was like
unacceptable.
It was like, hey, this is more than just like acting out.
Yeah.
Like this is a problem.
Yeah, it was a pretty big problem. I just remember thinking, but people were just like, let this kid go around. I was like, but I felt like this guy. I was like, what did it be like?
Yeah.
Oh man,
dude, I've been there.
So here's Jordan Peterson actually talking about schools and actually, you know, just watch it.
I did some investigation into the derivation of the American public education system and found out that it was based on the Prussian model. And the Prussians produced a universal education system in the late 1800s because they were afraid they were losing military superiority and they wanted to produce a cadre of mindless, obedient soldiers. That was expressly the purpose. And then that model was adopted by prototypical fascists in the US, again in the late 1800s. This is before Mussolini and all of that time. Corporate types mostly who wanted to produce cadres of obedient workers. And that's why the desks are in rows, and that's why there's factory bells, and that's why it's top-down leadership. What was really stunning about that wasn't only that that was the model, but it's worse than that, because the people who built the schools were consciously aiming at eradicating the will of the students who were part of the system because they wanted them to be obedient.
So breaking them.
It's breaking them.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Because you have to. Well, what am I learning? You just need to. Problem solve is what they would tell you, which is problem solving is good. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, you sit down, you do what you're told, obey me, I'm authority. And it's like school start when work starts. The bell goes off, like he says, the same way that the factories used to. And it's like, we've moved on from the factories and we're still producing like education the same way and wondering why it's not working. Mm-hmm. It's like over COVID, parents were like, wait. Well, so the kids went home, obviously, and then the kids were doing school online. And parents had kind of the first opportunity to see, wait, what are you teaching my kids?
Right. It was opened up to them. They had to be plugged in.
They had to be plugged in.
All of a sudden.
And also seeing what they were teaching. The bullshit indoctrination of weird ideology.
Yeah.
And I mean, but you're seeing it. It basically, it produces drones. I mean, you look at people, there's homework. Then people also then go home and they do work from home, not getting paid for it. Well, I just have to do it, be done by the next day. It's a form of indoctrination. And yet it doesn't produce an actual good citizen. It produces a good worker. People don't know how to like use a bank. Like they don't know how to do a check. They don't know what credit cards really are. They think it's free money.
Right. Like personal finance is like something you sort of just turned loose in the world.
Did you see that video went viral of the mother the daughter was confused about having to pay her credit card? She's like, but I already paid for it. And the mother was like, yeah, but you have to pay it.
No, all you did was incur debt.
Yeah. But she couldn't understand that. And she was a teenager.
Yeah.
She did not understand. And so for me, it's like, they're not teaching them.
Why does that teenager have a credit card anyway? That's a whole different thing.
Who knows?
Because nobody taught mom not to give your kid a credit card.
But like, they're not good citizens. We're not taught how to pay taxes. It's like, remember that video that went viral in the early, I think it was like 2014, about the kid. He did like a spoken word rap about the whole system. Like, we're not taught how to pay tax. We're taught, the mitochondria of the cell, but we're not taught, basically your rights. We're not taught the bill of like we're not taught any of like our founding fathers' declaration like of independence. People can't quote that. People don't understand like how our government works.
That is taught in social studies and in history, but I think it's taught, honestly,
it's just regurgitating
at a really early age for a lot of kids where it maybe isn't retained and maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think it needs to be taught later on in the education system where, especially in everyone's talking politics these days, like I think more openly than they ever have in our history. And so I think it makes sense that like high school civics and social studies like needs to really lean into that more than they have.
I agree. I just don't think that we're taught how to learn.
Agreed. I agree with that. We are taught how to learn, but we're taught how to learn as mindless drones and as a group.
Well, we're also like in the time of AI and computers and stuff like this, regurgitating facts hold really no value anymore when you could just search it. Yeah. Now, being wise and learning how to problem solve is a wonderful thing. But at the end of the day, what ended up happening was we valued the grade so high as if it actually said how smart you were, that people would cram study not to know and learn how to do something. It was just to pass the test. And what ended up happening is people go on to go to college and it was all about the degree. It's not about the process of learning. They go to just get the degree, not the knowledge really within the degree. And I was just talking to, when I was in New Mexico, my father-in-law's cousin was in town and she's a professor in California. And we had a full deep conversation about the education system. The kids don't care. They just come through and They just want to get that class because it goes towards their credit. She's like teaching valuable, cool stuff about art, but they don't care. They just want that extra point. And she was just saying how disappointed that she is. And I told her it was because we overvalue the degree and not the education and the process of it.
We also, as a society, not to make this the scope of this conversation much bigger than it is already, but we also overvalue immediate gratification. So rather than like, oh, for the sake of like future life experiences and life challenges, I want to actually learn this content and I want to learn this topic and be immersed and fully educated. Instead of that, I just want to get the grade. I want to get the degree. I want to get the credential that shows on paper that I did this thing and now I know it, even when you come out the other side and you may not.
I remember when I did go to private school and I would be so terrified of the test that I was going to fail that I'd almost like clam up and just not learn. It was more along the lines of like, I would end up finding a way to cheat and or like memorize certain things. And I found myself not learning. And when I was done with the test, I don't remember much, but I can remember books I would read or a fascinating topic that I would speak to, my grandpa about or my father. And to this day, I still remember those facts.
But that some of that, by the way, maybe you as a person, because
you're right.
Knowing you for many years now and knowing you as an adult, much of the way that you operate and the way that you process things and regurgitate things, it's all built around story for you in a lot of ways. The specific minutia is kind of irrelevant in a lot of cases for you. You're not too worried about like names or places or dates or whatever. You're like, here's what happened. Here's and you tell it really well. But for you, I think that is how you retain and how you process information is in the form of a story. And it makes sense that like the things you've gone on to do in your professional life and your career, a lot of it is around telling stories in one form or another.
Well, I want you to see this video. It was on TikTok. I think it got like.
So wait, this is jail versus school.
Jail versus school.
It looks like it's going to be saying they're the same.
It just government does what they do, and it just happens to be the same.
And put people in jail.
Yeah. It's just like institutionalized. I mean, the government does one thing good, and it set up systems and find the cheapest thing that they could do.
And mass educate, I was going to say incarcerate. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, dude, you're right though. And that comes down to even like my kids. I do want to be a father who can, and my wife does this too. We want to educate based on how that kid will learn. My son is very similar to me.
Your kids, clearly enjoy story too.
Nova, I think she likes hands-on way more than like like thinking about it, the philosophical like questions. Like my son is pretty deep for a little kid, and I mean he's 5, but I think he'll be very similar to me. And but I want to educate my daughter in the way that she'll learn. But like I said, there are downsides to homeschooling. I feel like there were certain parts of my life when we were homeschooling that I felt like I learned a ton. And then, but there were 7 of us. So sometimes I felt like maybe I wasn't learning as much as I wanted to about like more advanced things. I learned a lot of practical things.
Like, the way you guys grew up, there were periods of life where, simply put, it wasn't easy for your parents.
No.
So there were strains, in a lot of ways that I think probably educating 7 kids wasn't always like at the top of the list.
No.
Like sometimes putting food on it, like feeding those 7 kids, took precedence. And I think those are some of the scenarios where, like, back to Scientific American, there's a part of me that appreciates that there is a governing body that cares about, the quality of education that is occurring in some of these homeschool environments. Because, there are some where maybe it's not great. I think by and large, it's pretty good, but especially as the amount of homeschool students has increased so rapidly in recent years, almost doubled, there does need to be a little bit of some oversight there to help ensure, like, hey, like, is this still the great education that we hope that it's supposed to be, essentially, that it always has been? Because you got all these people that are running towards it, maybe hoping it's something that it's not. And so, currently, I guess the significance of this, when we talk about Scientific American, the piece here that's important is that they're calling for federal homeschool regulations. Currently and
Feds need to stay out of everything.
Everything.
Just protect our borders, keep us from being attacked. That's all.
But historically and in modern day, homeschooling is not regulated by the federal government. It's done at a state level. So different states have different policies around homeschooling. But to your point, by and large, I would say, speaking for both of us, we don't think anything the federal government does, for the most part, is good. Especially
the only thing they're good at is writing checks.
Fine, but especially getting involved in the home and the household and in a homeschool environment. No thanks.
My thing is are we a free country or not? And sometimes I feel like it's not getting to that point. Yes, I want the same government that's so concerned about, these kids, which awesome. They're wonderful people who really, truly care about kids. They're also the ones that just like let people, abort their children or teach their kids that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. Like but, and by the way, that's one of the problems that many people have had. And again, maybe why we're seeing a significant shift is that basically, like, creating mindless drones is great as long as they're being taught what you want them to be taught. I think there's a lot of people that are looking at the current public school system and the current curriculum, and they're saying that's not what we believe in my household. That's not what we know to be true. That's not the belief system that I want indoctrinated or instilled in my child. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of examples of that, especially in recent years. But I find that highly motivating. I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons of many that we want to homeschool our kids, because we want to know that our values and the values that we share, not just within our own house, but the values that we share within our immediate sphere of family and friends, the values that, as her uncle, I want to know that there's a shared value system there. I don't want some, bureaucrat federal regulator in DC deciding what our family, what our lineage, you and I, because we are family, like the idea that they're going to intercede on our behalf to determine, no, your child's going to be taught this, not what you as a community believe. Like, nobody knows our kids like we know our kids. Nobody's closer. Nobody cares about our kids the way that we care about our kids. And so, from someone in the federal government to try to get involved and try to dictate, what they are and aren't going to learn. Like, I have big problems with that. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I refuse that. Like, our kids are going to be taught what we care about. Our kids are going to be taught what we value, which by and large, I can say with confidence is better than half the shit that the federal government cares about. So, homeschool for us, I think is definitely the path that we intend to take for us. I say, like, again, collectively, you and I, speaking for both of our families, clearly we're advocates. And, I can, again, speak from experience of the public school system. I think that anybody listening could probably reflect back on their public school experience and think about some of the ways that maybe it wasn't ideal. And I'm going to be fair. But you're a brilliant person. You went through.
Oh, hey, man.
No, you went
thanks.
through school.
I was fishing for that compliment this whole conversation.
No, you are a problem solver. You are someone who also can take a moment to look at the bigger picture of things. You are not a drone, and you went through school. We're very similar. I'm more eccentric than I would say you are. I try to tame it in, but
I also, for much of my life, if you recall, like when you first met me, I was a rule follower and did things by the book.
He was.
And you guys, you guys really broke me.
You were. Well, no, that's just how it is. I'm like, bro, here, what?
Right.
Yeah.
And you and your sister, your family, like has a different perspective on that stuff. Like my attitude was like, well, that's just not done. And you're like, well, it is now because I'm doing it.
But there's also something in my blood that just, and I feel like yours too, that now it's just like, don't tell me what to do. I'll do the opposite sometimes, but that's also kind of bit me in the butt in the past where it's like, I'll do the opposite. And it's like dangerous or stupid.
I can too fly.
I can too fly.
Look, maybe in closing, I do want to say a couple things in favor of public school, or just at least give the benefit of the doubt, because there was a lot about my public school education that was really great. I got to participate in a variety of athletics. I got to meet a lot of people that I wouldn't have otherwise met, some of which are still very close friends today. I was exposed to learning from people and listening to people that weren't my parents, which I think is important. For people to respect authority, you need some experience growing up. Hearing from others and following the instruction of others. And I was really fortunate to have, I think along the way, I had some bad authority figures, but I also had some really great ones. I had some good coaches, had some good teachers that really cared. And, I think my public school experience is a little bit unique in that the first half of it, up until about 8th grade, was rough. It honestly was rough. I went to some dangerous school districts I was involved with, like nationally ranked as problem schools. 8th grade, moved to a very small town in a different part of the state, and continued that way through high school. And it was a very different experience, a very positive experience. And so you can't cast a broad brush on all the public school system necessarily, just like you can't necessarily group all of homeschool experiences together either, because I think there's really great homeschool experiences and some that are subpar.
There's some bad ones. I've heard them.
Yeah, but by and large, like the approach to educating children and preparing them for life, I'm all for public school, all for the homeschool approach personally.
But do you feel like you were taught and influenced mostly by your peers or by your parents and teachers?
Man, good question. I guess it depends on like what I was taught. I was taught a lot of things that, I was taught a lot of social things by my peers. I was taught a lot of, like I said, frankly, looking back, a lot of the bullshit, just distractions.
Because there was times that I was, especially my teenage years, though I was surrounded by, teenagers in church or other homeschoolers, there's plenty of homeschool groups out there. Now they're gigantic. Whereas there might've been, 50 people in our homeschool group. There's homeschool groups that my nephew's a part of that there's 1,000 kids in a part of it. But,
I'll put it this way. I've learned, I seriously mean this, as an adult, watching YouTube, I've gained far more knowledge, useful, practical, applicable knowledge from YouTube than I ever did in all my years of schooling. I learned a lot of things in school that haven't reflected on or even thought about in 10 years, or I've just flat out forgotten it. But the stuff that like I need daily or need critically in that particular moment, like I've learned so much from just continuing my education journey as an adult. And that's where it goes back to what you talked about. Like the biggest thing you can do for your kids, I think, is teach them how to learn. Like teach them what questions to ask, teach them how to make decisions, like their decision-making process, how to come to a conclusion, how to pick a course of action, and to act. And to not be afraid to act and not be afraid to fail, because you can always do it again. And so I think like that's really what we need to be teaching our kids. Not how to be good at education, not how to be good at going to school, not how to be a mindless drone and how to fit in and fall in, but it's how to identify a problem, how to address that problem the most effective way possible. And I think that homeschool kids come away better with that.
I hope so, because that's what I'm doing with my kids. But you know what? It's also like, I feel like with school and with my friends, when they finished school, they were like, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't have to learn anymore.
That's what I was.
But like, I don't have that feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I still, you know me, I'm constantly consuming. I love to learn.
Same.
I feel like if I'm not humbling myself in some way with learning something new, then I feel stagnant inside and it makes me uncomfortable.
Well, look, I think the explosive growth of YouTube in the last 10 years.
It's changing everything.
Well, it's I think shown that actually we all have this deep desire to learn and to know more. I think that that's why YouTube has, if you look back a long time ago, it was really kind of like a more obscure entertainment platform. And it's really become actually a fairly, more than fairly, an extremely comprehensive resource for education.
Most of Harvard classes are on YouTube.
Yeah. And there's people who have entire channels, lots of channels that exist around. The whole thing is how to fix your car.
You used to have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to come speak in your corporation.
Yeah.
And Ray Dalio, you couldn't sit down with him for less than like 20 grand.
Yep.
Now he has an entire YouTube channel talking about how he invests.
Yep.
Principles, his old, and he might have, he has like 1 million or 2 million followers. I'm like, why are like 20 million people following this man? It's brilliant. YouTube is amazing. It's changed a lot of things. But homeschooling doesn't always look like curriculum. Sometimes it's just doing things like you said. Mm-hmm. When we were in New Mexico, I talked to my kids about like what it was back in the Wild West. Talked about the mountain.
Yeah.
Talked about the heritage of where their family came from. So when we got there, they were excited. There's the Rio Grande. Oh, it comes from, we talked about that. Took the kids up on the mountain, 10,000 feet up in the air. And we drove the back end. But we got to see a storm come up and over and just kind of curl around and like kind of stop right up there in the mountains. And you could just see the moisture being sucked in by the trees and nothing going to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And then we all just sat there and talked about it.
Well, just adding on to that too, like
adventure.
We did something similar in terms of your description with Yellowstone. Like when we took our kids out to Yellowstone and like we were able to explain like I remember you talking to Riker about, the volcanic activity and what a geyser was and all these things. And he asked all these questions and
what?
He was a little worried about standing on a volcano.
Under us?
He was honestly just expressing out loud our inner fears of standing on a volcano.
Well, like what we've found, I think that it's going to instill adventure and asking questions to our kids. Now, I understand a lot of people, they can't afford this. Some single parents, whatever it is. I understand that.
All these national.
Well, I'm just talking about even homeschooling, man. It's expensive. Like we had to kind of rearrange our whole life.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got to not work.
Yeah. Someone's got to be with the kids.
Or not work full time anyway.
And it's so fun right now. My kids on Mondays when Irene really sits down and just does a traditional class teaching and all this stuff. And they just love it.
Really?
Oh, man. It's Monday. It's school day. They'll pull out their,
Which, by the way, is opposite of every public school kid in America. No public school kid in America, out of excitement and joy, shouts out, "It's Monday. It's a school day."
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't
My
happen.
grandpa told me this. He's like, he didn't tell me stop asking questions. He said, you're asking the wrong questions. And because my thing was like, well, why? Well, why? That's not a good question.
Is that how you asked it too?
Oh, I was a little bitch. Yeah. But he would just be like, yeah, that's ask me more details. What's the detail behind your question? I can't just broadly answer your question. So I do the same thing with Riker. When he were like, why is that? Like, I'll be like, what do you mean about that? I try not to tell my kids, stop asking questions, because
you try
kids,
not to say just because.
Yeah. Except for what
Although
I'm trying.
Sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
By the way.
But for example, when I'm trying to take a pee, Dad, why do you want the door shut? Because. Why? Because. There's moments like, whatever. But I think in general, we need to continue to ask those questions. We need to not be done with school until the day we're dead. And, continually learn.
Which is homeschool. We're still homeschooling ourselves. We're just...
the whole purpose of this podcast was to kind of force ourselves to learn something new every week.
Yeah, you're right. And we do.
I swear, though, the more I learn, the dumber I feel. Because, when you go into
That's true.
It's just... When I was so young, I felt like I knew everything. The older I am, I'm just like, I'm really stupid.
I think the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
Like the more you learn and the more knowledge that you take in, you're like, there is an infinite amount to know and to learn. And it's just impossible.
Trying to read a book on quantum mechanics, I'm like, it's what?
Yeah. I mean, like when you're in your mid to late 30s and you're feeling like you know a lot of stuff, and then you're introduced to a topic that you realize, I don't know anything about this at all. I didn't even know this was a thing. And you realize how deep that rabbit hole goes, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about anything.
I like that feeling though. Makes me feel young. I'm still learning.
I kind of like it.
I love it.
Well, you're a better man than I.
No, I'm just curious.
All right. Well, look, we're advocates of homeschool.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of positive things to say about it. In a few years, we'll be able to report back to you guys and tell you how it's going. But look,
I'll be like, my kids are criminals.
Yeah, they were arrested at the age of 6.
And shout out to good teachers. Like, there are amazing teachers out there in school.
That's a good point. Yes.
Like, thank you for being
a public school teacher is tough.
Yes. And you don't get paid much. Thank you for being good teachers, because I've heard of a lot of wonderful teachers.
Actually, according to Dave Ramsey and his top 5 professions of people that become millionaires, teachers is one of them.
Maybe they get paid too much. No, I know that's not the case.
It's something like accountants, engineers. It's all process people. We'll do a podcast on this actually because it's really interesting. So I won't say any more. We'll come back to it. But anyway, that's a side note. But look, as our resident expert on homeschooling, do you want to take us out? Do you want to do the honors?
Well, I'm extremely dyslexic. I still spell like I'm 12. I'm not uncomfortable with crowds, though. A lot of people think that I'd be awkward. I am more comfortable on stage than I am in the crowd.
I just want to point out, too, by the way, that the word dyslexic, in terms of saying it and spelling it, is totally unfair.
It is rude.
It's like... It's unfair for kids. It's like the word lisp. Yes. Like kids that actually have a lisp, they can't even say it. Anyway, I just want to, point that out in your defense. But
if there's any other weird homeschoolers out there like me, comment. Let us know. Would you homeschool your kids? We're going to.
Or do you homeschool?
Or
if you do, please comment and tell us how's it going? What are some of the challenges? What do we need to know about? Yeah, that would be helpful. That'd be useful if you don't mind.
Yeah. And remember, continue to learn. Don't be done with school.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.